Welcome to World Regions Geography, Lecture 2, Part 1. We're going to be discussing Europe. We're going to be looking for learning outcomes. We're going to analyze how Europe's landscapes develop around regions of distinctive geology, relief, landforms, soils, and vegetation. We're going to explain the rise of Europe as a major world region and understand how Europeans established the basis of the worldwide economy. We're going to describe the reintegration of Eastern Europe and summarize the importance of the European Union and its policies. We're going to identify the principal core regions within Europe and assess the importance of language, religion, and ethnicity in shaping ongoing changes within Europe. Describe Europe's patterns of demographic change and urban development. So we're going to start with environment, society, and sustainability. One of the things you notice right away about Europe is its central location. If you look where it's at right here on this global map, you see that it's connected with Asia, it's close to the Middle East, it's close to Africa, it's close to North America, so it's fairly centrally located in order to move goods, to transport goods, to have goods and services cross its borders. The other thing you notice when you look at this map is that Europe is a continent of peninsulas and islands. Not only are all the islands down here in the Aegean, there's all these small islands, but you also have Sicily, you have Sardinia, Corsica, you have these islands, you have United Kingdom, you have Ireland, you have Iceland, you have the Shetland Islands out here. These islands right in here between the Baltic and the North Sea that make up a lot of part of Denmark. Lots of islands. The peninsulas, you have, of course, Scandinavian Peninsula, you have the Iberian Peninsula, you have the Italian Peninsula, Greece, but you also have Brittany up here, Normandy, Denmark, Finland, all peninsulas with a lot of access. The thing when you look at Europe, you realize that it's oceans all around it and relatively close to every country. I mean, even Switzerland and Austria, which are landlocked, the Czech Republic landlocked, is still not more probably than 100 or 200 miles to the ocean. It's really short distances. It has lots of navigable rivers. You have the Danube, the Dnieper. Danube's over here, Dnieper's over here. The Elbe, northern Germany. The Rhine is in southern Germany and Switzerland, right through here. And the Seine, which is in northern France. All are navigable. All have major cities and major ports on them where many of the goods of all over the world come in and out of. Things go out of Europe, things come in. Watersheds, large drainage areas. It's well-drained continent. So it's very good because there's lots and lots of rivers. We just name some of the large ones, but there's lots of small rivers. So climate and climate change. Northwest Europe has a moderating effect of the sea. And what that means is, one, of course, you know that water, if it's near the ocean, it not automatically moderates weather. If you are over by the coast, it's going to be a little cooler, a little nicer weather than it is in Modesto. But the other thing you see right here is this is the Gulf Current, and it flows up out of the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean up here and into northern Europe. And what that does, it brings warm water out of this region and puts it up in here. And so it comes down and it moderates the temperature in this region right here. And it makes that region's winters much more mild. If it weren't for the Gulf Current, their weather would be much, much colder. Eastern Europe, on the other hand, is separated from this, and so it has a more continental climate, very extreme seasonal differences, hot summers, very cold winters, um, typically very cold. Mediterranean Europe, which is this region down here, has cool winters and hot, dry summers, much like the weather in California. Same Mediterranean climate. Climate change has a potential huge impact on Europe, and it's because this region through here has it's very low lying. Southern United Kingdom, all this along the Atlantic and North Sea and Baltic coasts, including the southern part of Sweden and Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, parts of Poland, and this area through here in France. All is very low lying, and even with moderate sea level rise, much of that area would be inundated and the face of Europe would be greatly changed. Now, the UN Kyoto Protocol is an emissions trading protocol, one of the things that came out of it, but the main part of the protocol is that it is about reducing carbon emissions, CO2 emissions, by 5% by 2012. That was one of the main tenets of it. So there's geological resources, risks, and water. So there's 4 principal physiographic regions. In other words, there's 4 regions that are kind of distinctive. Landscapes are a product of centuries of human adaptation. The Romans modified the landscapes, and it's been being modified by Europeans through the Middle Ages until today. And so it changes how the land is used and what we can do with it. Now, they're basically geological resources, risks, and water. The Northwest uplands, which are the oldest rocks in Europe. Let me see them there. The uplands are high and hilly. The Northwest uplands have a lot of seriques, which are deep bowls where there's glaciers formed. Sometimes the seriques are the cause of glaciers, sometimes they are caused by glaciers. And mountainside basins, fjords, which are areas where glaciers have retreated, like this area right here. And they've retreated and created these deep valleys. And moraines, which are the debris left when glaciers retreat. So there's rocks and gravel and boulders and large things like that that are left as they retreat, which mark the retreat of the glaciers. Alpine Europe, which is the area, Italy, Switzerland, the Balkans region, a lot of agriculture, a lot of tourism. It's good for a lot of that. The Northwest uplands is that region. I forgot to mention that. That's the region up where Norway and down through Scotland, northern England, Ireland, and Iceland. Central Plateau, which is the Austria, eastern Germany, and parts of northeastern France. Europe's coal fields are located there. The Massif is located there, and forests. A lot of heavily forested areas. The forest from Little Red Riding Hood and all the little fairy tales are all about the forest, like the Black Forest in Germany. Northern European lowlands, they stretch along the Baltic, North Sea, and Atlantic coast, along the coast and southern England, are flat and gently undulating. The region of farming and settlement, so it's very rich agricultural, and part of that is because of the loose soils, which are airborne silts that come in mass quantities and are deposited there, which makes a very fine soil, real good for growing. And the steppe area, which is in it's in Eastern Europe and it stretches into Central Asia, and it's a large grassland. It's great for growing wheat. This area Northern European lowlands is an area that if there were rises in sea level, even moderately, a lot of this area would be inundated with seawater. So medieval Europe had significant transformations of the landscape. During the medieval times, they drained a lot of lands. They created a lot of farmland from marginal land. They had a lot of drainage schemes to drain swamps and real low-lying areas. Like I said, a lot of the area along the coast on that European plain, very good for farming, but water tends to settle there. So they had a lot of drainage schemes. And then along in the 13th century, two big events happened. One was the Little Ice Age, which stretched from the 1300s to the mid 1800s. And that had significant impact because a lot of the marginal land no longer was usable for farming. It was deserted. And the other thing that happened in 1347 to 1351 was the Black Death, which greatly reduced the population. Estimates are from 30 to 50% of the population died off in a 4-year period. And so that changed the social structure. That changed Europe immensely and created a lot of opportunity that had not been there in the rigid social structure prior to that time. The modern landscapes of polders, you may have heard of polders. They're low-lying areas reclaimed from the sea. Often when we think of polders, we're thinking of the Netherlands with the nice little windmills turning there, and they're pumping water out of low-lying areas and create this land that you can live on. Now with sea level rise, that is becoming a problem because that land that was reclaimed from the sea, may again flood and greatly reduce the size of the land. Industrialization. So industrialization in Europe, when we think of the Industrial Revolution, we think of Europe. The Industrial Revolution started in England because they had water, they had plenty of water, and they had hilly areas, so they could have water wheels, and then eventually coal mining, and they started being able to operate factories using steam power. But this, of course, created a lot of pollution. And in California, we don't see much acid rain. But if you live in the northwest part of the U.S., if you live in parts of highly industrialized Europe, you see a lot of acid rain. That's the nitrous oxides and sulfur oxides that get up into the atmosphere. And then when rain comes, it comes down as nitric acid and sulfuric acid and is pretty damaging. Right now, we're seeing a lot of acid rain in the Pacific Northwest, which is coming from emissions from China. So that kind of shows you how globally connected we are, even when we're trying not to be. Europe's history and foundations are laid by the Greeks and Romans. A lot of the major cities, agricultural systems, and self-sufficiency were designed by the Greeks and primarily by the Romans. With the decline of the Roman Empire starting in the 4th century CE, you slowly gave rise to a feudal system, which was a consolidation of the lands owning system and a consolidation of cities. And the way cities and farming is done in Europe is way different than the United States. People live in cities and travel out to farms rather than live on their farms so much as like we think of farmers in the U.S. And part of that was for protection during the Middle Ages. If you lived out there by yourself, robbers would come and take everything you had.